Hello folks, and today we're going to talk about one of Mrs. Keating's favorite kings, Louis XIV. Louis XIV you were introduced to as an absolute monarch. Remember, absolute monarchs are those who rule with total power. That would be a good annotation to make. Louis XIV seen here, known for his sexy legs. When you see images of Louis XIV, loves to show off his legs. So Louis XIV is the absolute monarch of France. When you talked about him in the age of absolutism, he was the one that we talked about, that they talked about the age of absolutism historians place from his reign until the French Revolution. So let me get rid of this. So my objectives, these are my objectives in this presentation. One of the things, a couple vocab words I want you to be make annotations of is Versailles. That is the palace built by Louis XIV. And I would like you to make a annotation about the Edict of Nantes, which granted religious toleration or religious freedom to French Huguenots. Huguenots are French Protestants who were practicing, who were wanted to practice their religion in Catholic France. Remember, the king and the majority of people in France were Catholic. The Huguenots are French Protestants. Under Henry of Navarre, the Huguenots, those French Protestants, got the right to practice their religion. However, it was taken away by Louis XIV. Religious toleration means that you can practice your religion. So, a couple things to understand how Louis gets to be this absolute ruler who dominates everything in France. He becomes king at a young age. He is 4 years old. And when you have a 4-year-old in power, it's not really a stable government. So what ends up happening is the nobles, when Louis is young, the nobles revolt, and that happens in Paris. Louis is dragged from his room at this young age. I believe he was 7 when the Fronde happened. In this noble riot, he scares him. It will traumatize him as a child. And he was determined never to be threatened by the nobles again. When he is age 22 is when he will have full power. Up until age 22, there was a regent in place who was ruling for the young king. At 22, he takes power, and Louis begins to put his spin on France. The first thing, remember how he's traumatized by a child. He does not trust nobles. He is determined when he becomes king to get as much power from the nobility as he can. And those nobles are that landed governing class. So what he does is he begins to take nobles from his council. So as a king, he had all these advisors, a council. What Louis does is he begins to appoint middle-class men to his council positions and push the nobles out of power. The next thing he's doing, one of the reasons that nobility is so powerful is it's such a small group. The larger that group is, the less special it is, the less power they have. So he is selling noble titles to middle-class men. He is increasing the government's power. He's taking the right of nobles to arm themselves away. He's forcing people to move. He's putting taxes on things. And then we're going to get back to this last one where he's going to actually force the nobles to live in his beautiful palace of Versailles, which is going to be an immense palace, and it's going to take a large amount of France's income to build. One of the things that Louis does to gain his power is he decides to deal with the Huguenots. And what he does is he revokes the Edict of Nantes. So that means he takes it back. He tells the Huguenots they either have to, their children will have to be raised Catholic or they will be forced to leave. Now you have to remember the Huguenots are these wealthy merchants, these skilled laborers. So they're skilled workers. This is going to put a problem on the economy because you're going to lose that educated, that skilled class. But Louis wants that power, so he's taking away the Edict of Nantes. Remember, the Edict of Nantes granted freedom to French Huguenots. So the Huguenots either have to convert their children to Catholicism or leave, and many choose to leave. I have this video here that is on Google Classroom that shows you this beautiful palace. Versailles is just gorgeous, and we'll talk a little bit about it in class today. So what is Versailles? Versailles, you have to think, I keep calling it a palace, but it is actually a city. When Louis was young and the Fronde happened, he lived in Paris. As a result, when he becomes king, Paris to him equals terror. He does not want to be in Paris. So the king owns this hunting lodge in Versailles, and he takes that hunting lodge and he's going to convert it to this gorgeous palace. It will cost over $2.5 billion to build. I mean, it's literally going to bankrupt France. This palace has to be big enough to have the nobles live with him. And what they're going to do is they're also going to serve him. So they will actually move to Versailles and they will fight to put the king's coat on, to wake the king in the morning. All these little servant things, the nobles think this is real power and they chase it. And they all are living in Versailles. So Versailles becomes the seat of power. Louis XIV's nickname is the Sun King. He loved that idea, the idea that the whole of France revolved around him. And if you look at Versailles and when you see the video, it's made so that all of France glorifies the French king. It is to show the power of the French king. This is just one ceiling tile in the Hall of Mirrors, which again I will talk about in class. So what is Louis's legacy? He took over France and he makes France into a European power. They emerge as one of the strongest powers in Europe. I mean, when he's ruling, they're conquering lands in North America. They're sending ships out. They're competing with Britain for control of India. I mean, they are at the height. He really makes them a powerful nation. They are also going to become, when we started the class, or when you ended World War I, Italy had the Renaissance, and that was the center of art and culture. Now everybody is coming to France because France becomes this country of great art and literature and learning, and there's an explosion in culture that happens in France. We talked about them being a great military power. These last two, though, are two huge problems that Louis left. Between the building of Versailles and France's Louis XIV's war, when he dies, his successors have to pay his bills. He leaves millions. He just leaves France just owing tons and tons and tons of money. The other thing that happens in France is the gap between the nobles, the rich, and the poor widens, because one of the things that under Louis XIV, the way that the tax structure was, is the nobles did not have to pay taxes. The poor did. So because of that, the building of Versailles and the wars, the poor are going to have this great tax burden that must be overcome. So with that, please make sure you have annotated your notes. If you have any questions, please write them down on a Post-it note and place them on the board so I can answer them. In fact, I know you would have questions. I do expect you to have questions. So please write your questions on the board and we will continue with class. Thank you.